Hi guys, so university is done for the year, my second year is completed. I submitted my last assignment on Tuesday and I'm now going to try and get back into doing the things that I want to do, which includes booktubes. I'm going to talk to you about the books that I enjoyed over the past semester that I'd studied at university. So I'm going to talk about the books that I have managed to fit in 2 books over the past week that I've read, so I'm going to talk about those as well. 4 books to talk about, and the first one is Women in Love by D.H. Lawrence. Now this book is huge. It was the biggest book that I had to read on this semester, and it is 475 pages long, and it did take me a while to read it. I had a 3-week Easter break and I spread reading this book out over that so that I could get it read for the week that we went back. As you can tell, I really enjoyed it. I don't normally put this many sticky notes in a book, but there are loads, and yeah, D.H. Lawrence is quite, not notoriously hard to read, but a lot of people don't like his writing. A lot of people don't get on with it and don't think, I think people think he's a bit flowery with his writing, but surprisingly I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really interesting. It was a really interesting exploration of the unconscious and relationships and desire, and the relationships between men and women, the relationships between women and women, and the relationships between men and men. Because there is arguments that this book should be called Men in Love instead of Women in Love, and I can definitely see why. The lecture that we had on this heavily focused on the unconscious and desire, and I can't say this word, the philosophical side of the book, especially in relation to the character of Birkin, and whether he is D.H. Lawrence in the book. I really do recommend this book if you want to read some Lawrence. There's also a short story I read in my first year of university called The Wintry Peacock, which is quite a good book as well. It's quite short. Definitely recommend that if you wanted to read some Lawrence. The next book is the book I had to do my presentation on, and it is Nightwood by Djuna Barnes. Now this isn't a very well known book. It was first published in 1937, I think that's right. 1936, and it is set in Paris and New York in the 1920s, and it basically is for me it's a kind of social commentary on homosexuality and what was seen as other in the 1920s, and kind of a commentary on that, and exploring different characters within that world. There is Dr. O'Connor, who is a cross-dressing fake doctor, who kind of provides the kind of commentary for the story. There's Robin Vote, who is the main character of the story, even though she doesn't get her own voice and she isn't in the story quite a lot, but she is the fixation of the characters of Felix and Nora. It's very hard to kind of summarise this book, because the writing is very, what I would call perfumey. It's very fluid and it's very hard to read the first time, because you feel like you're skimming over everything, and you feel like it's kind of like being in a trance when you're reading it. It's very poetic and it's very metaphorical, and I had to read it through twice because I was doing my presentation on it. I wanted to make sure that I was definitely understanding what was going on, and it is a very complicated book, but I think once you have like read around it and understand like kind of the key themes that are going on in the book, then it is easier to understand. There was some great discussion in the lecture about the book, and I did my presentation on performativity, which is a theory put forward by Judith Butler. I'm not going to try and summarise that theory, because I couldn't really do it effectively in my presentation without having a debate with the class, although Stevie over at Sable Court did posted her last video in her gender series, and she kind of does talk about Judith Butler in that a little bit, so I will link her video down below if you wanted to get a little bit of a summary, or you can just search Judith Butler yourself. It's very complicated, but it's a very interesting gender and identity theory. So that's what I did my presentation related into this, and at first it was one of the books I hated, but I think because I did a presentation on it and I had to look at it more in depth, I ended up liking this book. The next one is Virginia Woolf. No, not Virginia. Is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. And again, this is a very hard book to read. It's set over one day, and I looked at this, and in my book haul for my university books I was like, oh, this book is going to be so simple, it's so short, but not the way Woolf writes. it's the story of Clarissa Dalloway and the party she is holding and the day that it happens, but the way that Woolf writes this is it focuses heavily on the time, like the theme of time and the theme of memory, and it's so fluid with the past and the present that the characters kind of hit off with one another, and then you go into it's like stream of consciousness. And I'm so not good at just like summarising books. But basically, one minute you'll be in the present and then you'll be in someone's memory, and there's no real distinguishment between the two. You're kind of, all of a sudden you're just reliving Clarissa's life, and it's kind of, I think it does help the book because with it only happening over one day, you need an insight into her life, and through memory you do. Her life is kind of laid out for you. I did my essay on this and another book I'm going to talk about in a minute in relation to time and chronology, and I'm thinking that I want to do Woolf for my dissertation, because even though this is a really, really hard book, I really did enjoy it, and I think her writing style is very unique, hence why she's a modernist writer. I don't know if I summarised that very well, but it's a very complicated book, and I think it scares people, but I think if you give it time and you read around it and you understand how Woolf viewed literature, then you can see why Mrs. Dalloway is written in the way it is. The next book is The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. This is another extremely complicated book. Again, it deals with the themes of time and chronology, and this is the book I wrote about with Mrs. Dalloway in my essay. The first section is probably enough to put a lot of readers off. It's told from the perspective of Benji, who is mentally disabled, and he has no concept of time. Time doesn't really happen to him in a structural way. When he relives his memories, it happens as if it's happening in the present. He doesn't distinguish the fact that something that's happened in the present has set off his memories. He's just reliving it as if it's happened for the first time over again. And it's a really interesting way to start the book, because you do get all of the information, but you have to read the rest of the book to kind of make sense of what happened in Benji's chapter. And then I don't think that you really do get a full explanation, because each of the sections are so completely different. There's Benji in the first section, who's mentally disabled. There's Quentin in the second section, who's obsessed with time and his sister, and he fixates on his memories to do with his sister, and you don't know whether you're reading his fantasy or whether you're reading the facts of what happened. And then you have Jason, who is completely different. He's a completely cold character. He is very, very detached from reality, from his life, I think, and he blames his sister for everything that's gone wrong in his life. And then the last chapter is kind of going back to a traditional 19th century omniscient narrator, but you still don't get everything answered. So it's a very complicated book to read, and a lot of people didn't like it on the module. I really enjoyed it. Last 2 weeks I wanted to read, and I'm so happy that I can now read books that I want to read. The first book that I managed to get through was Cassandra Clare's Clockwork Princess, and I know that every man and his dog on BookTube now has read this book, and I'm so behind, and oh my days, I still don't know how I feel about the ending. I'm not really, I was thinking about it yesterday, and I've not really computed what I think about it. I don't know. This book was probably the best book she's written. As Harry was saying over at Read Tomes, you can just tell her writing has kind of come to a crescendo at this, and I'm hoping that the next book in the Mortal Instruments series is going to carry on the way this is written, because I just think that the pacing she has, and the character development, and just everything, how it all tied in together, was so much better than any of the other books that I've read. But still don't know what I think about the ending, and I just feel like, oh my god, what's going to happen in the next Mortal Instruments books, because there is a hint of something happening in the last section of this book. But yeah, I think it might take me a while to figure out how I feel about the ending. The next book that I read was Jodie Picoult, The Storyteller. I'm actually going to do a review on this, I think, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but basically this book centres around the theme of forgiveness in relation to the Holocaust, and whether or not so many years after, the people that perpetrated in the war camps should be forgiven, or it should just be like, okay, it's in the past. And a huge section of this book is given over to a survivor story, and it really did affect me. Every time I read something to do with the Holocaust, it affects me. And just knowing that that Jodi Picoult did interviews with actual survivors and then drew all of those together to create the character of Minka and her story, it still shocks me that people have had to go through that. It's still to this day, I just can't fathom how people survived that. But yeah, I'm gonna do a bit of a more in-depth review and discussion on that soon. And then the book I'm currently reading, I've decided to pick up this and get it read, which is The Clash of Kings, in the second book in the Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire series. It's huge, it's so big, and I don't know, I'm only 18 pages in at the moment, and I know that these books don't offer much happiness, and I'm hoping that I really enjoyed the first book when I got into it, and I'm hoping that I will enjoy this book. But after reading about the Holocaust and then having to go and probably read about people beheading people and all sorts going on in this book, I'm hoping that I enjoy it, and I'm hoping that I get into it. But yeah, so that's the book I'm currently reading. I haven't really got a definite to be read pile for this month, so I think I'm gonna record a video and ask you to choose the next 2 books that I'm going to read, depending on how long it takes me to read this. But I'm going to record a video and I'm going to let you, the viewers, choose the next 2 books in my to be read pile. So that should be up sometime after this one, and I'm just glad that I can get back into booktube and that I can now forget about university for a bit and hopefully get good grades from this semester, and then the stress that is 3rd year will come at me in September. But in the meantime, I'm hoping to get more active in the community. I've also recently rejuvenated my book blog that I will be posting reviews on, and various other things to do with books. So I hope you enjoyed the recap of my university books, if I summarised them coherently enough. If you have any questions about anything else that I studied and any questions about the books that I studied, then leave a comment down below, and I shall see you in my viewer's choice video. Bye!